Hi friends, welcome back to Hebraic Creations. Are you ready to drive the final nail into the coffin of Eusebius's doctrinal sham? Last time I provided evidence that Yeshua's ministry was actually about a year, not the 3.5 years that Eusebius claims, and I showed you some Hebrew context and early manuscripts data. Now we'll look at the scientific or astronomical evidence. Michael Rood states in his book Chronological Gospels that Eusebian doctrine is mathematically impossible based on his research. He's referring to the 40 years of intense study he conducted compiling an astronomically corrected biblical calendar, which he used to prove Yeshua's 70-week ministry. Rood credits his findings to a few others. Sir Isaac Newton, who's a 17th century physicist and mathematician, Robert Scott Wadsworth, who is a contemporary biblical astronomer, the Israeli New Moon Society, and Nehemiah Gordon, who is a Hebrew scholar, and last but not least, the NASA astronomy program, which allowed him to calculate celestial and historical events to 1/1,000,000th of a day, granting him unprecedented accuracy. To appreciate the value of Rood's corrected biblical calendar, let's look at some history. The modern Jewish calendar was invented in 359 CE by Hillel II for convenience sake. The religious leaders no longer wanted to bother with Jehovah's methods because his calendar protocols were not predictable enough for them. So rabbis wanted diaspora Jews celebrating the Moedim in unison globally with as much ease as possible. And Jehovah's calendar was based on two signs, astronomical and agricultural. First, the astronomical sign is when the new moon is sighted. That indicates the new month. And it's not a precise science, and it can't really be predetermined, so it varies a little bit. The second sign is the agricultural sign, and that is when the barley crop in Israel is just right, or what they call Aviv. The agricultural sign is a bit more involved because you also have to correspond the barley crop to the sighting of the new moon. That indicates a new biblical year. Being a bit more involved explains why the rabbis wanted to dispose of Jehovah's parameters, but Rood has now reinstituted them with his corrected calendar. For a good explanation about the methodology behind the Aviv, check out the article by Nehemiah Gordon entitled The Aviv Barley in the Biblical Calendar. He's the guy who supervises the Aviv in Israel. His website is nehemiahswall.com. Next, I'm going to mention some dates, so I need to clarify that although Christians often use BC and AD for dating, I am just going to use what Rood uses in his book for simplicity. BCE, which means before the Common Era, meaning before Yeshua's birth, and CE, which means the Common Era, and that pertains to dates after Yeshua's birth. They basically work the same way, it's just a matter of preference. So in developing the astronomically corrected biblical calendar, Michael Rood has challenged the Eusebian eschatology that we often find in modern Bible footnotes by stating that Yeshua was born in 3 BCE, not in 1 BCE, that he was baptized in 27 CE, not in 29 CE, and finally, he was crucified in 28 CE at age 31 after 1.5 years of ministry, not in 31 CE at age 33 after 3.5 years of ministry, as Eusebian claims. Remember that Eusebius tweaked interpretations. Well, they were all done to fulfill Daniel's 70-week prophecy and exalt Constantine as Pontificus Maximus. To make his case, Michael Rood uses 3 focal points. The first one is the historical facts and archaeology pertaining to the names mentioned in the book of Luke, chapter 3, verse 1, where he talks about Herod and Tiberius Caesar, etc. Secondly, he also considers cultural norms regarding the proper interpretation of Luke, chapter 3, verse 23. I will read that verse. And Yeshua, not yet 30 years of age, commenced his ministry. That really means he was approaching the end of his 29th year. To explain, in Western culture, we see a child is 1 at the end of his first year, while in Eastern culture, a child is not yet 2 at the end of his first year. So the third focal point that Rood uses are historical facts gleaned from 4 unrelated rabbinic manuscripts that substantiate the Sanhedrin's bribery of the 2 Roman guards to pinpoint Passover of 28 CE as the date of crucifixion. It's important to nail down all these dates when applying the NASA astronomical program. Passover falls on different days of the week each year. It's not like our Thanksgiving, which is always on a Thursday. In the year Eusebius claimed Yeshua was crucified after a 3.5-year ministry, the timeline does not allow for 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. However, in the year that Michael Rood claims Yeshua was crucified after 1.5 years of ministry, the timeline does allow for 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. So let me demonstrate. I have this little chart that I made. It shows the right year of Yeshua's crucifixion in the top chart and the wrong year in the bottom chart. Notice that there are horizontal rows for nights and days, and vertically there are columns for each specific day of the week. In the right year, the Passover falls on Wednesday, April 28th, 28 CE. That's in the top chart. Very clearly we see shaded boxes for 3 nights and 3 days. In the wrong year, the Passover falls on Friday, and that's where we're getting the Easter Sunday, Good Friday doctrine. Notice there's only 2 nights and 1 day shaded. This is what happens when you add 2 years to Yeshua's ministry timeline. Everything is thrown out of alignment. Also, the Passover week scriptures about his death, burial, and resurrection must be read with a Hebrew lens and a spring Moedim framework. It's important to note while reading these verses that Passover is actually just one 24-hour period followed by 7 days for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The first and the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread are high Sabbaths. These are in addition to the regular weekly Sabbath. So it's really important to keep that in mind when reading those passages. Using the corrected crucifixion year provides the correct Passover/Feast of Unleavened Bread Sabbaths that correlates to the given contextual details, ensuring 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. This is the final nail in the coffin of Eusebius's lie, because this perfectly satisfies the Jonah prophecy, which is the one and only sign Yeshua told the Pharisees he would provide to prove his authority to overturn the man-made rules of the Pharisees. Let's read Matthew chapter 12, verse 40. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. This is where I would love to turn on sirens for emphasis. Without fulfillment of the Jonah prophecy, Yeshua could not be the promised one. Next time, we'll uncover more false teachings in the church which are causing Jews to reject Yeshua. This will be very interesting, so stay tuned. Shalom.